I'm going to start. So everybody has a map in front of you. This is the map that we're currently working off of. You'll see there are 4 designations: suburban node, suburban corridor, traditional node, traditional corridor. Then there's a spreadsheet, and ultimately the spreadsheet tells you what the breakdowns of the corridors are, right? So you have within traditional node and traditional corridor, there's traditional node 2.5, traditional node 4, traditional node 8, traditional corridor 2.5, traditional corridor 4, traditional corridor 8. So just looking at these, how do we know?
Well,
we're gonna go through and fill in the blank. So that would be good. Let's just go down this list, and we're going to put a designated height, basically is how this comes down to, next to each one of these. Then we'll have to run that by the committee and when we have an actual full committee. So, starting on the right of the map, Niagara Falls Boulevard, Wegmans. Right now we have that as a 1, or number 1, which is, and then if you look, that's a traditional node, and 2, which is Walgreens. Sorry. What? Oh, suburban. Why? What did I say? We're not dealing with the map. Okay. Starting on the spreadsheet, number 6, Consumer Square, Ridgely. So again, we're looking at height issues. That's in that area 6. That is in the opportunity zone. And I'm going to propose, and well, again, we're not a voting body here, but I'm going to propose that 6, 7, which is University Place, 10, which is that triangle with the Marriott in it, that 6, 7, and 10 all want to be a full 8. No, I'm just looking for disagreements. Anybody disagree with those concepts? Oh, I'm sorry. I said there's yes, 6, 7, 10. Any questions about any of those?
My question is not to the allowable height, but I'm looking at 10. I think we made some changes to the designations, the form. Calling that traditional, I guess if that's the way we want it to evolve, that's one thing. It's just hard to imagine that one adhering to the more traditional form. That's the golden triangle.
Given the current building?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
But if there's any further development on the site, it'd be out parcel development.
So, where would the out parcel development occur?
I'm just gonna back up for a minute. So Alyssa, we're looking at a map?
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's an accompanied spreadsheet. And I can stall here for a minute if you want a second to
take your coat off
and relax.
So are we going over the red?
Just take a moment.
We're going to go through the spreadsheet. All right. So we'll hold up. You want to hold? You want to? First two. All right. So what we're talking about is Consumer Square, Ridgely, number 6. Right? It's inside the opportunity zone. It's the area furthest away from most residential. It backs up to the 290. It's an area that we know development wants to occur, potentially hotel, mixed-use facility. 7, which is across the thruway, which is the area that's University Place. There's currently 3 sort of major buildings in that area, 2 mixed-use buildings, higher density, and a hotel, still higher density. And then 10, just south of the university, which is the Marriott. And my proposed height limitation was that those could all be 8 stories, which we don't have a voting body here tonight, so we're just going to prepare a set of recommendations for the voting body.
Can I be reminded of what the current standard is now, please?
I don't know. Okay.
A lot of these parcels are GB, which would allow up to 65 feet.
Oh, okay, so this isn't contradictory to, this isn't a revision to the code that was just adopted, the
No.
comprehensive language?
No, so they, right.
What, our standing code. Okay, then I'm familiar with that, thank you. Okay.
So what we're doing here is we're mapping the traditional node, traditional corridor out into other places. And we have a couple different designations. We have a 2.5, which we talked about being the lower density, a 4-story height, which we talked about in areas around like the Village of Williamsville, places of a little bit higher density, and then an 8. The intention of 8 is to allow a higher height, but then really probably have the market push out like 5, 6 stories.
May I ask, though, this would be form-based, so there would be...
The same,
We have the, and 8 stories really is higher than the 8 stories that we are traditionally used to, which would be sort of a literal 10, 10, 10, 10, correct?
Right.
Visually, on a human scale.
there's no way to build a 10-story story, right? A 10-foot story doesn't really exist anymore.
Anymore?
Yeah.
Okay. So this would be more like, 8 stories would maybe translate to about 100 feet, presumably? Is that a safe number?
92 to 100, somewhere in that range.
Okay, so fairly high.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
To interrupt for a minute. On my way in, they are going to be turning off the elevator. So they asked me to make sure other people, the fire company is doing something to the elevator. If anyone needs to use the elevator, let me know now.
okay. So again, with the traditional form base, we're basically taking the traditional form context that we talked about and mapping it vertically, right? So similar design features, design components, just giving it different building mass and height. So so let's start with number 10, which is what Dan was talking about when you walked in, Alyssa. So 10 is the Marriott. Currently 16, is it that high? I feel like it's 16. 10? Okay. So currently
Marriott
10
itself
stories.
is 10.
So we're looking at that facility, right, in that context, trying to figure out, one, should it be traditional? And so Dan's suggestion was that it's hard to see the site turning traditional. My sense is that you could potentially see traditional outbuildings starting to string up along Flint, which is an entrance to UB.
I would agree with that, and it would be nice to encourage a more pedestrian-friendly area towards the university. That seems like a no-brainer with new businesses moving in that are doing well, like Zeddy's Pizza Places and student living.
I think it...
Sidewalks would help.
Sidewalks would help.
And a bike lanes.
So I think if you're here, Dan, you look at the side of this building, granted it's the blank face right now, and if you continue down Flint, back towards where the Marriott, the bass of the building is,
So what you're suggesting is the
You're not that far off.
parking lots would convert with out parcel development, and you would
Right.
want those to have a more traditional form or setback.
Yeah, and if you look at the buildings, again, they turn a blank face to Flint right now, but it wouldn't be that hard to, I mean, they're not that far off of the street now. They're more traditional setbacks. There's some parking in front, but I'm saying that's, with sidewalk, that's walkable, that's walk up.
Yeah, I'm not, well, it's fine. It's hard for me to see it, but that's fine.
Well, that's why we're a committee.
Fine. I understand.
So,
Absolutely.
does anybody else feel that way?
I mean, part of what makes traditional is are the streets, right?
Right.
So I'm having a little difficult time trying to envision a different street network and grid in here.
So, I think that if you look at Flint, if you took out that turning lane and added bike lanes or parking lanes, and then added sidewalks, that would be a fairly quick transition. Is Flint a town road?
The local road, yeah.
So, it's something that we actually could control.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we need to widen Flint in order to do what you just said? It's not wide enough to have
Bike lanes, I think
the
you're saying.
bike lanes and 2 lanes.
It's hard to imagine it without, I mean, you'd have to have turn lanes in certain places. You got a left turn lane, continuous, which takes up space.
Why do you need a turn lane?
For left turns on Flint?
But why? How much vehicle volume is actually on
Well, I
Flint?
can't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay.
But based on experience, there's a lot of turning movements in and out of the restaurants and the hotels, so.
I'm just
I
saying,
would say there is a lot of student traffic, having done that lane, having, people, I think students sometimes see that as a shortcut, even though I don't believe that it is. There is a lot of student driving through there, and faculty and staff, people who affiliate with the university or work there. And then, of course, students live right there at the Triad.
Actually, to your point, even further than I mean, Flint is definitely an issue for us, because if you look across Millersport Highway, where the medical offices are, on the south side of Millersport, or on the east side of Millersport, if you keep going over, Kim, you're gonna see apartments in there where there's a large number of students that live. So if you pan over to the east, I don't know if you can make your way
I do
over.
see the merit of trying to encourage university neighborhoods, though, because the North Campus doesn't have, it feels more like an industrial park than it does a presence with any civic pride. Incentivizing creating a walkable community that would service the students and faculty, I think is a nice idea for the students and faculty that work and study there.
we know we have a tremendous amount of pedestrian access here. But we don't build a road that actually services pedestrians. We build a road that services vehicles.
Right.
Left turn movements matter more than the 100 pedestrians an hour, or some goofy number. What was the number?
It was 100. There were we counted about 100.
100 pedestrians an hour, and we're worried about left turn movements for vehicles. We should be slimming the road down, putting bike lanes in, and making this a pedestrian access point so that people coming out of these apartments and out of this neighborhood can easily walk and safely walk into the university.
That's fine, Brian. I'm looking at it as more of a suburban concept.
I don't agree, because there's a lot of traffic for the hotel, the restaurants. We also have a lot of people or all the hotels, we have a lot of people who use those hotels and use that road as a way to get
There's a lot of vehicular
to the
traffic.
North Town Center. I don't think slimming that road works. I think if you want to add pedestrian and bicycle, you need to widen the road, and there's enough space to widen it.
But we're talking about widening a road with 100 pedestrians an hour next to it. I mean, we're going to induce vehicle speed and volume and kill pedestrians, right? That's Niagara Falls Boulevard. Widen the road. Yeah, so that's nothing. I mean,
Where'd you get that number from?
that's really not a lot.
10,000 cars a day on 2 lanes.
Well, that's my point. I'm not saying widen the road to make the road wider. I'm saying widen it to add the bicycle lane and pedestrian.
I'm saying you drop the center lane. Look at the width of those lanes. Zoom in on those lanes. There's no way that those are standard 10s. So you got 12 and 12, right? So those should both be 10s. So you get a foot on each side.
What are we arguing about here?
I want to be able to turn when I want to go into one of these places, and I can't
I agree,
turn
there's gotta be a
from the
turn
lake.
lane there. If you want to do something with the corridor and make it more pet-friendly, you're gonna have to add sidewalks.
But you don't need to add
No doubt about
you don't
it.
need to turn out of a 12-foot turning lane crossing a 12-foot driveway.
You're gonna narrow it down and add bike lanes on either side then.
6 feet.
I'm not even
both
talking about the road, I'm just talking about the opportunity
so I'm
to
saying,
put a
so-
traditional form of development along that road.
So this is one of the few places leading into the university where we have the ability to actually put a traditional form of development leading into it.
And if that's what you, then I can see the need for it, it's hard for me to envision it go traditional.
I think you're going to create more pedestrian accidents without having a turn lane, because you're going to cause traffic jams and create chaos on that road. I already wait in the turn lane forever when I'm turning into any of the hotels. And since we have a lot of groups that stay there, think about a weekend, we have a tournament over at the Northtown Center.
But the debate's not about the turn lane, the debate's about where we put the buildings.
Here's the interesting thing about this, but can you zoom out a little bit more? A lot of us have probably gone to the university there. That's the front door to the university.
Right.
That is the front door of the university. It's not the closest entrance to the university to the campus proper. That happens up at Coventry, but that, in theory, is the front door of the university.
We're surrounded by a sea of asphalt.
We got solar panels going on, we got facilities, buildings. We can't even get the university to let us connect to a sidewalk over there. So there's definitely some improvements that need to be made here for ped movement. I don't debate that at all. I'm just not sure about imposing a traditional form there, when everything there today obviously has a suburban form to it. That's my point. You guys can go from there.
Well, this is future ownership, correct? So we're not pushing out the DoubleTree or the Marriott. We're just hoping that future 30, 40 years from now, if the Marriott decides to leave, that goes a different direction that enhances the town and enhances the experience at UB, and maybe creates a better partnership.
If they want to make changes to those buildings, and you impose traditional zoning in there, we're going to have nonconformities to deal with, which can be overcome, but that has a suburban form to it.
So I don't think it's going to be 10, 20, 30 years. I think it's going to be very soon, because the hotels are already looking for new spots for their flags. That's dated product at this point, and it's going to become student housing. And they already house all the international students there anyway.
I don't necessarily agree with that, and I think your discussion about the campus, you have to remember that campus was built the way it was intentionally, not to be walkable friendly, not to have large groups be able to congregate, and they designed it so everything was far away. And UB needs to work with us if you want to make changes. If we can't have fire vehicles go down a service road to get entry into student housing, why are we having this conversation? And I also think the hotels, though they may be looking for new spots, there's always going to be a need for hotels close to the university, and I don't see that strip of hotels, maybe a little bit of it'll change, but I don't see that strip going away.
Do we have a quorum yet?
Well, I mean, the University of Chicago model and what they did at the Ramada, the hotels are being bought and transitioned or turned into student housing. I mean, Maggie's totally on point there. That's happening with old models, and new hotels are cropping up all over the place, including the Northtown Center in the near future, Niagara Falls Boulevard, et cetera. So I actually don't think that the hotel the need for hotels, we're not, in, a desperate state where the market won't meet that need.
Actually, when there are tournaments or major events going on, people can't all stay in Amherst. They are booked solid, and adding 1 or 2 hotels isn't gonna change that. But I think, I wouldn't vote in favor of what you wanna do. I think it's a suburban area, and we need to think of it that way, not traditional.
Okay, well, the fortunate thing is, I think we have a quorum? No, oh.
I also think we shouldn't take a vote, when we just barely have a quorum, we shouldn't take a vote on something this important.
Well, okay, but we have to still move this thing ahead. The color of the map has to have, we have to give it some color, right? So right now it's blue.
Well, we saved this one little section for next time and share what the discussion was. And move ahead on other pieces.
May I ask the reasoning
Why?
across the street, just in relation to this conversation, why that is remaining suburban when it would be...
The triangle is actually suburban. It's being proposed to be changed to traditional, that's why the stuff across the street is suburban.
Okay, so, but then in this change, was there not a discussion about part of 11 that mirrors it on the other side, being traditional as well, to sort of create, if we're doing bike lanes all the way up the street, does it make any sense to have it sectioned off that's across from the...
We're having that discussion now. I don't believe there was a discussion before that was made.
So we're gonna pause here for a second. How many people are actually on the committee?
7 people. 4, 2, 4, 5, 15.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're not on the committee.
Irrelevant of whether we have a quorum, I think we're missing too many key people tonight.
So here's the situation, right? We've got an area leading into a major university that has a road that's town-controlled, that has 100 pedestrians an hour on it. Like, this is the exact condition by which you would plan a traditional node anywhere else in the world, except in Amherst, where we're locked into a traditional suburban model because that's what we've done for every year forever. That's what we're saying. So we're gonna continue on and highlight this one and come back to this one because we're afraid of change. We're gonna back up.
Don't get snarky. People have different opinions, and it needs to be respected.
I actually think there's a majority of people in this room who might think differently, but we don't have a quorum, so.
Brian, the other thing is, I think Alyssa brings up a good point about 11. I know it's not on the spreadsheet, but you look at a lot of those buildings over there, they're already sort of near the street, so those might want to look at traditional on 11 too. I mean, that would be a lower scale because you have the neighborhood behind it.
It would have to be a center.
A corner.
Corridor, sorry.
Traditional corridor. But I think Alyssa makes a really good point there about wanting to encourage that type of development, especially as you have the neighborhood behind it.
All right, so we'll take 11 and 10 and add them to a mix of things that we need to review with the committee next meeting. Going backwards to 6, which is where we started. 6 is the Consumer Square area and the Ridgely space. So, for anybody who doesn't know, Benderson owns the old Ridgely Annex, the UB Annex. They're hoping to do high-density mixed use. They have plans for walkable spaces, and I'm proposing that should be an 8-story max, because that's an area of town that has really no other massive single-family detached residential or otherwise abutting it. It's a good spot for it. Has access points to the thruway. It sits in the opportunity zone, and it's a space that I'd like to see maxed out. Any thoughts otherwise? Okay. Moving on, University Place, which is number 7. How tall are those buildings?
We got at least one
Is it five and the hotel six?
So the current site configuration at University Place, we have a couple of sixes, a five. Do you know what's going on across the street?
Yeah, we got a 5 and a 4 going on the street.
And so it's a higher density area near the university. We have a traditional 8. Anybody feel otherwise? Okay. The Boulevard Mall site, number 8. Auctioning in April or May. A lot of malls, a lot of square footage to tear down. I'm proposing that as a traditional 8 as well.
May I ask,
Sure.
based upon news reports, there was chatter about breaking it up, the town creating streets. Is this something that will change the, if you're doing 8 stories, it'll be a very like a dense city situation?
So, you zone at 8, I don't know that you really get 8 everywhere, like the market's still gotta bear that out. And there's areas where people can go higher that, they tend to just balance out, but I'm going by that type of graphic, right? That sort of density is what the town's proposing, and that's probably the density that it would take to leverage somebody actually tearing them all down and doing something different. So, yeah, it's sitting in that wheelhouse.
I'd like to add, when we looked at this, we talked about putting lots of other things in besides mixed use and, housing. We talked about putting parks in, we talked about recreational activities. We had a charrette where we worked on it with some experts that came in from out of town, and we came up with a lot of ideas that we would encourage, I believe we would encourage developers to consider.
So, you have to zone for buildings, but, certainly that the desire is to try to create more of a planned community, planned facility. Anybody have an issue leaving that as a traditional 8? Okay. The next item is Wegmans at Alberta. This is one of those, it's actually the same parcel as the mall, giant footprint. This includes the parcel across the street from it, 9. It includes Ashley Furniture. It also incorporates, looks like it stretches down Maple and absorbs some office facilities, and Reed's Gens is in there. It's stepping down towards single-family detached on the other side of Bailey. My suggestion would be the likelihood of Wegmans and Ashley transforming are probably the slimmer in this area, and I would think that we should probably step down towards the residential and it come down to a 4. Thoughts? Anybody have any other ideas here?
I agree.
Okay. Okay. The next item, skipping the Golden Triangle, which will be the contentious issue of the evening, it's always good to have one, is the Northtown Plaza. So if you're looking down the map at 12, this includes, is this both sides of Sheridan? So it includes both sides of Sheridan Drive. I actually wonder if this one shouldn't be split, but...
It's not split, it's split on the south Edgar. Okay.
But it includes the northern Sheridan.
I'm just saying, I would think that the center with the TJ Maxx, the former Toys R Us, the LA Fitness would be more predisposed with the bigger sites and bigger box retail to go higher than some of the stuff at Northtown Plaza where we've already seen WS's Phase 2, which is all single story, or is it single story?
It's single.
1 2-story. So I guess what I'm wondering is if you zoom in, if this shouldn't be, some of the stuff, especially along the boulevard, shouldn't be up as, these are multifamily housing units. If this stuff carrying the Boulevard Mall to Sheridan shouldn't be up higher, like an 8, and if this shouldn't drop down to a 2.5.
I would think that's a good idea. That sounds reasonable, and that's an old Edgardsville neighborhood, still a single family. I think that would be a good move.
Dan?
Well, I'm looking at the Northtown Plaza and thinking that, you're saying 2.5 on Northtown Plaza?
Well, I think a lot of it's already proposed.
It is, yeah, but I think 8's a little generous on the north side. I'd like to see a transition to the mall, right, but...
So you're thinking 4s?
Yeah, something like that. And that's right up against those residential units along, right?
I just think though that we should split it down the center, down Sheridan. 2.5 on the south side, 4 on the north side.
I thought you said 8 on the north side.
I did. I'm agreeing with you on 4.
Yeah. So 2.5 south of Sheridan.
Yeah, build up towards Maple.
Right.
Okay. Right. So we're gonna split that? Yes? Okay. All right. Split it on Sheridan. All right, 13, which is, it's a little bit of a weird shape here. So the problem with 13 is it includes that narrow neck along Sheridan, where you really don't have the ability to go up real high, right? But then you get into the much deeper Walmart parcel. So that becomes a little bit, tougher, because you could see 4s up near the UPS store and the Walmart, with the depth they have, but then certainly as you taper towards Taste of India and that, you'd want to see that come down a little.
I just wanted to point out that it may be possible to have more than one district in its center. So instead of separating the centers, if they're both going to be a traditional node, you can keep that in the plan, but you can have 2 separate zoning districts within the center. It's just an option as well.
Yeah, I'm saying I would think that the space to the east of North Bailey probably could be 4 relatively easily, but then the space west of North Bailey probably wants to be 2.5 with the nature of the buildings in back of it,
right,
and the depth of the parcels.
But you wouldn't necessarily need to split the center in the plan, unless you want to make it a corridor instead of a node.
Well, that's my question, are those narrow enough to call that a corridor, or is that definitely still a node?
I'm thinking this is part of the corridor. That's my thought on it. And in the Walmart parcel, back to the conversation about the Golden Triangle, is actually big enough that you could actually get a transition there if you wanted to, but I don't think anything more than 2.5 stories along there is really tolerable.
Are you finished? If we edit 12, and we include all of this on Bailey at 2.5, does that work? Does that satisfy what we just did? Change the geometry of 12 on here, pull it into 13 a little?
With 12 though, why, especially the north side of the Northtown parcel, why wouldn't we allow for some height down there? I mean, 2.5 fronting Sheridan, where across the street could be 8. I mean, why don't we at least have 4 along that, and then 2.5 as you get onto the other side, Egger, going into the neighborhood?
We split this, right? I mean, we said this is 2 and 4 here, right? 2.5, this was 4, right? And then somewhere in here, I can't remember.
We're trying to figure out
Trying to figure out here.
Yeah, what about WS though? That's, I meant to say the south side of Sheridan, I'm sorry.
2.5.
So he's looking at phase 3 of WS.
Zoom in a little.
their proposals too? Okay, so,
No, that's fine, I just was having a hard time feeling.
so if WS is already proposing two-story, then maybe we just keep it at 2.5.
This is phase three, your people prefer phase three.
Yeah.
So that's technically part of 13.
Right, well, that's what I'm saying, 13's kind of an amalgamation here, right? It's,
Yeah, well, we could edit that line.
right,
We're gonna split 12.
yeah, so that's what, right, so I'm saying, so cut Sheridan, make the south side of Sheridan all part of 13, and make 13 2.5.
Okay, so the north side of Sheridan is 2.5?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
okay, yes?
Is everybody okay with that?
So here's what we're gonna do. So right now, I know it's hard to tell on the maps. Right now, this area here would come off, or this would remain 12, and this would be 4. So that's west of Delta, all the way to Niagara Falls Boulevard. South of Sheridan, we would pick up the whole WS development site, which is proposed at 2 stories. We would leave that at 2.5, and we would add it to 13, which then picks up, like, from Delta over to Sweet Home, both sides of Sheridan, at 2.5, still traditional. Yes? Okay. Good, thanks, Brian. So then we get into 18, so then we're jumping over to, where's 14? 14's coming down Niagara Falls Boulevard. Yeah, I think that's clearly 2.5, and it's a center. Yep. No, oh, corridor, sorry. That's what I meant. I keep saying center today. And then 15 lies along Eggert, and that's clearly a 2.5 too. 17, so 16, right? 16's an anomaly here because it jumps up. It's right at that intersection, and it includes that Elderwood building, which is currently how high? Is it 3.5, 4 stories? Can we drop the guy?
I think it's
Yeah, so it's like, it's a high 2.5. So, I mean, I'd be okay with 16 staying 2.5. That's an awful building. I'd be okay with 16 staying 2.5 and then taking 2.5 down 17, down Bailey. Yes? No? Okay, all right. Let's see, where are we next? Northtown Auto. This is where it gets fun, right? So if we go to 19. So this is a tough spot, and this is something that, frankly, somebody asked me about earlier in the week, and I opted to switch meetings, so I could avoid it. So anybody who doesn't know, so this is Dent Neurologic. Dent Neurologic would love to, nothing more than to be able to expand on their campus, but they're landlocked right now. So they have a Roswell Park Oncology suite moving into a full floor. There's an infinite amount of interest from Dent and from Roswell on expanding on the footprint, but they're blocked sort of by Auto World here, right? We're between Northtown and Mike Barney, and then the Temple's back here. So the Temple's now Northtown, officially? I thought there was some weird...
No, they haven't,
Okay.
they haven't knocked down the building, but they paved a lot of the land already, and it's full of cars.
So Northtown makes a ton of money here, and as a result, are not really interested in selling any product or land to Dent Neurologic. However, the question I always ask myself here is, do I bet on high-end neurological-based medical science, or do I bet on automobile sales? So this is in the opportunity zone, right? It's predisposed to have people invest in it And if I were an outside group looking to invest and I didn't want to do mixed use, I might say, hey, I'm going to invest in neurological medicine. So I sort of feel like this is an area that has the ability to really become kind of a Amherst medical campus type space. And the auto sales thing, I don't know, is something that we need to plan long-term. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you can see medical already. It's car medical, imaging, dental, gynecologist. It's either cars or medical along Sheridan.
So on the north side of Sheridan Drive, not the south side, you abut residential. We clearly have that right now as a suburban corridor, which is probably correct. The north side, do we allow that to go, whatever medical wants to build it in that area?
Are they gonna wanna be there versus closer to like hospital or research?
It's
Those are the competitors. Dent is not,
Yes.
UB, whatever, university, like in Conventus, there is a neurological center.
Right.
UB is its direct competitor, so, and, Dent draws from all across the state and out of state, because it's so well known. So Dent can only grow, and it would be nice to keep it there because it is a huge, resource for us and the residents. It's good to have a place like that here.
I'm recommending 19 be an 8 in a traditional 8, so that we could see a medical footprint grow to the density needed to support purchasing the auto sales. There's also not a ton of residential in the single family back in that area. There's a few houses, but that would be a natural area for growth.
They're actually, primarily rentals. They're
Okay.
duplexes and rentals, I thought.
So
So at senior housing back there, that was associated with the temple, is that correct?
Yes, that's
And that
still there.
remains?
Yeah, that's apartments and it's not going anywhere, but they're now in the middle of nowhere. The synagogue, deserted them.
But that's
Well, it'd be nice
also,
if a traditional neighborhood popped up right over there where they could walk and do things.
But but it's all, right now, it's all duplexes, or even some apartment buildings further back.
so that apartment complex is 3 or 4 stories?
This one?
Yeah.
I was thinking two.
I think it's
No,
taller.
not Shari's attic apartment. Shari's attic should be
Shari's Attic's 3. I'm advocating for an 8, let the market do what it wants.
I would only pause to ask, Dent does draw, it's not a, pedestrian situation, this is all cars. So with that density and knowing that this is really people driving to get there, how do you mitigate that?
I think the issue becomes the market sort of self-corrects and puts the parking back along the thruway, like Dent currently has it, or structured parking. Yeah, I think ultimately it'd be interesting to see if Dent added a bed tower or an on-site hotel to service their clients.
Would you incentivize, underground parking, something to that effect, so that we'd have less surface, or in concert with surface, but I think medical there
Sheltered
makes sense.
in parking, yeah.
Yeah, but this is going to draw cars, it's not gonna draw pedestrian,
But you have the depth of the parcels deep enough that you could, right, see, traditional build-outs along Gettsville in Hartford with buildings clustered in front with parking in back. Again, so Dent's it's sort of surrounded by parking, but they could pull the buildings, the buildings in the future could be pulled to street alignments within. We just haven't ever thought about laying it out with actual interior grid or street alignments. It's not gonna be like a mall, and so you're gonna be able to push parking around it still.
The 8 stories just seems high.
I think 8 just gives them a max of range, right? The target is 5 to 6.
Yeah, I would be okay if we were saying fixed.
Yeah, that's probably...
No, it's the one...
It's on the other side.
You're talking about Homewood Suites.
Oh,
Yeah, it's Homewood Suites.
So that's right up against the single family structure. That one. Is it? That's one.
How did you, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So that's fine. I think that with the designations we have available to us, I think that 19 being an 8, as long as 24 is the south side of Sheridan's a transition zone, I think that makes sense. Because the market's not gonna force 8 stories everywhere. Not everybody's gonna build Dent Neurologic Part 2. But they could build 2 and 3 stories. They could build up to 5 stories if they're gonna do on-site accommodations. I look at this similar to Ridgely campus, the way it's bounded.
We talked about this a year or so ago. There's only a few places in town where you can get this kind of density, and clearly they're along the interstate. And in this case, it's, aside from the folks that live in there now, it's pretty well isolated.
Alright, so I'm gonna suggest 8 again. We can talk about this again with the whole group, but we leave 8 there for now? Okay. Alright, moving on. Let's see, where are we next? Oh, yeah, okay. No, so 25 is...
Your neighborhood.
Is Sattler Dellwood. This is, Alyssa, we talked about adding this to traditional last time. This is like a 2.5. Yeah, okay. And then Six Corners itself still is kind of a traditional 2.5? Okay. 27, coming down that way, Bailey, Grover, Cleveland, that's a traditional 2.5. Does 2.5, is that what Sutton's proposing there?
He's proposing 3.
Yeah, there's just like a, yeah, so 2.5.
Well,
Is it?
it's probably
We're actually dimensioning it in feet, so.
3 on the rear.
We have it's front face, so it's off of Bailey. So the dimensions will be fine. 28 south of that, it's Bailey Live Work, and 29, which is Main Bailey. So, is there a reason to separate those two? Do you want to go take the guy to the Dunkin' Donuts?
Just 'cause one was Live Work.
One of those sites is available now on the market, did you see that? On Bailey, near...
That's about 4 in there.
What?
There's a question about 4.
4 here?
Yeah.
At the corner.
Right.
I'm willing to look at 4. I think 28 wants to be 2.5.
Can you zoom in again?
So 28 is, do you want the first person perspective, Jackie? Like drop the guy in?
No, I'm just trying to figure out, I'm having a hard time following everything
Okay.
on the map.
Can you back up? Okay. Scroll the other way for a minute. Let's stop here. So this is, so, okay. Yeah. So this is 27, we're saying 2.5, and then scroll down. This area here is 26, we're saying 2.5, oh, not twice, 28. And then the question becomes, what happens at the corner? So can you drop the guy in right here?
I just want to remind us that, I mean, the 2.5 is fine, but those are almost all single-family homes lived in by residents on that part of Grover, Cleveland.
There's a barber shop.
Yeah, there's a couple of those, but I know a bunch of people who live on Grover, Cleveland,
So
and have for like 30, 40 years.
So the question here is, what do we do with the corner?
step back away, so.
And then we have to answer the question about 30, which is the University Plaza, right? So we're starting to taper up to the plaza, 29's this corridor leading up to the plaza? What are your...
I think it's 2.5, I mean, you're still neighborhood behind it, you're transitioning from Bailey.
On 29?
2.5 still to that point?
Yeah.
And then when you hit the plaza, what? 4? Okay. And then 31's back down to 2.5? Okay. All right, turning the corner, 32, Eggertsville, Main and Eggert, west side. We had some conversation about this last time.
Is that the Key Bank building?
Yeah.
Which one are we talking about right now?
So,
The 30.
so we have 32, and we separated 32 and 33. Or, no, we added the church to 33.
Yeah, so now it's west side versus east side, and we had said that the west side would be allowed to be higher because of the Key Bank. That's why we split it up that way.
It's like the Sharks and the Jets.
I thought we also further separated the, Palladino building out, so it isolated the Key Bank parcel, and the Palladino building would then be basically part of 33.
Yeah, can we drop the guy in on the Palladino building for a minute? Sitting like right under a speaker, I think. So that's 2.5, right? With historic tax credit, so it's not like likelihood to change. So we could do that. I don't have a problem with that.
Well, and it's also an entry to that historic neighborhood. There's a new park behind it.
I know, ironically, when it hits the neighborhood, it hits it at 3 stories because of the Great Break, but, so...
That would still fit in, if you measured it, probably in the future, 2.5 stories will be maybe the same footage as the building that's currently there now.
Yeah, I don't have a problem breaking that. And then dealing with 32 as a parcel is the bigger question, right?
The projection for the tech corridor starts there. What is, the vision?
So, that's a good question, Dave. I don't know, I mean, so, can you drop the guy right on Main Street? So this parcel, this 32 also picks up Sacred Heart. I just want to point that out because that's something that we need to pay attention to. If we're talking about zoning restrictions, they're already at 3. So, you know, I mean, we do want to pay attention to the building next door. To me, this is a 4, and if the building's not going to be picked up by tech companies, basically, to turn into relevant office space with some kind of ground floor retail, then the building's likely to, I think, Maggie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, ultimately, the building would have to be demoed, but there'd have to be an inducement to get them to demo the building. It's a lot of square footage of ready office space.
Yeah, I think it's, based on the conversations with Benchmark, I think it's probably more likely for them to add on to the building to make it multi-tenant than to demo it.
They talked about stepping some space out front, trying to add a coffee shop type thing that would help create some
Like a lobby. So
desire for tenants to be in it.
the floor plates are tough. But, yeah, they don't really know yet, I think, is part of the issue.
But they could transform the outside of the building.
Yeah.
That's something that we could, so we can still recommend a traditional fitting to it. And certainly Sacred Heart's traditional.
It's gotta be traditional.
So going back to Sacred Heart being a part of this parcel, does it make sense to then segment that out to maintain its integrity, to make sure that it remains 2.5?
Well, it's not, it's 3.5. It's actually taller than what we would allow in the 2.5 now.
But it would then be an existing non-conforming, which we're creating all over town, but then it would preserve the historic nature of that site.
Isn't it landmark?
No, it's not. Well, Locally, yeah.
Can they get some sort of historical status to?
Local landmark.
Okay.
But you're asking them to be existing non-compliant with anything that they need to do on the face. So they're already subject to historic preservation, scrutiny. So I think you let them be of right zoning, knowing that they're going to HPC for any alterations.
I see, so they're not 2.5 and they're not quite 4, so they're a better fit for the 4.
They're
Based on that
actually,
logic, correct?
Yeah, they top out closer to 4 because of the pitch of the roof. So I think the goal here would be to take this key bank building, certainly a traditional layout at this node is gonna help the thing.
It's definitely traditional. I would point out that we had a concept design for this parcel, and it essentially called for residential around the northern boundary to kind of buffer the single-family houses behind it. So to go 4 on the entire parcel, I'm not sure that's
How tall is the
what I
gym?
would do. I was just gonna say, it's gonna be hard to drop. I don't know, can you get in the alley? Does the alley let you in? Well, it's an alley, yeah.
No, but I'm
Well, there
not...
were those really nice brownstones that are going on Bailey.
Look
that
at it
kind
from
of-
Eckerd. No, go to
Yeah,
Eckerd.
you gotta go down where Palladino's thing is. You might be able to see it from the church, the entrance to the church right there.
Yeah, right there.
Yep.
But I'm saying, it's the gym box is shorter than the main building, right?
It is.
So if you wanted to, what you could do on the parcel is you could say the front treatment's a 4, and then back where it steps into that residential area, it drops to 2.5.
That's what I'm saying. That was the concept we had originally for that area.
So it'd be a tapered zoning.
I mean, the gym was a fight. They do. You don't have Maggie, what'd you say, you don't have room for what?
No, we're talking about the Key Bank Center. Yeah, having it sit 4 up at the road and then drop down to 2.5 when you drop as you approach residential. How tall are those residentials? Are small,
They're small.
single stories?
2 stories probably.
And then they go
And
up the land.
they also sit on a rise,
Yeah.
sitting on a hill.
Well, it's the bottom of that side.
Right, so I'm saying, so you probably don't wanna go full 4 up to them.
No.
But the 4 does carry a setback. It's just, I'm saying, I would say, I agree, like, transitioning 4 to 2 at some point during, in the middle of this parcel probably makes sense.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if we have that concept. Okay. We don't have access to it here, I don't think, but the concept plan for that showed 2 to 2.5 story buildings in the back along the residential area.
So any issues with that? Knowing there's still a setback on the traditional, right? So you can't just park a building right at the edge of the parcel. You have to be off of the edge. You have to be closer. How would that work, though? You'd have to bring a road in. Max setbacks?
Alley, just an alley or a private road.
Yeah, private, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay,
It's all one parcel, so.
so we're good with that idea, the transition zoning? Yes? Okay. Next, Main Neggard East Side, we talked to that plus the Cadlesian Center we're looking at as being 2.5. Okay. Snyder, Main and Harlem, I think we've beat that one up pretty well, 2.5. Okay. Harlem Strip, 35. Where's it? Oh, it's the parcel we segregated out. That's a 2.5. Okay. Kensington, Saratoga. That's 2.5. Yep. West of Village, north of Main, 39. We talked about this last time. I was advocating for 4. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped 38. I'm sorry. 38. I was advocating for 2.5 on that. The hotel sits within it, the Hyatt, I was advocating for more development similar to Snyder Square or the, Riker.
You're on 37.
I skipped 37, we said was 2.5, we're on 38.
Okay, so it's wrong.
I'll just go out on a limb and say I'd rather leave the Hyatt existing non-conforming. Yeah, okay. We're saying 2.5, yes.
On 38?
Yes. It's fairly built out.
It's pretty well buffered, too.
It's buffered on one side, but not on the other. Both sides. It's 38 straddles.
Why am my 38 is on the...
You're looking, this is
All right, got it.
This whole night, we've been arguing about nothing. No. The Shatkin building, it's only 2.5.
We did, Scott brought it up.
We talked about that.
We talked about it.
And then, so if you drop the guy right in on Kensington there, near Snyder Square, right there. Yep. So if you look at that, right, Snyder Square approaches the street. Oh, Snyder Place, I'm sorry. Whatever. People from Snyder. So I don't cross the thruway. But I'm saying that's a 2.5-story building. I don't like the setback, but the height's right in that area. Issues, thoughts? I want to leave it at 2.5, like the Riker. Okay. Okay. Moving on. 39, which is that area. Now this is an area. Yeah, well, it's Walker Center all the way through the Tops Plaza with open field and stuff behind it. Yeah. And my suggestion here was 4, because that's what the village zoning is. And to me, it's probably an area that really needs to be reconsidered.
I think that's a good idea, that's a reasonable spot for that.
Yep. And then 40, which is across the street, so this one's a difficult one for me because I actually think it should be split at South Forest. So if you drop the guy on Main Street, yeah. So like drop the guy right at South Forest and Main. It goes from the village line, Union Road, all the way to the 290. Like, okay, from the Mosey over, turn the guy facing east a little. Right, from the Mosey over, there's this gap, right, where, like Verizon, there's some really bad buildings in there. And then you get Elderwood, which is another higher density building. And like, this is a walkable area of the village, and I don't mind having some height along that area, but then turning west, like, that changes topography quite drastically. So, I'm not sure that I could see 4 stories kind of in any of that area. So, to me, it should be split at South Forest.
And are you suggesting 4 stories?
I'm suggesting 4 to the east of South Forest and 2.5 to the other side.
You're splitting 40. You're gonna split 40.
The north side of the
What? North side of Main Street's 4.
Number 40.
South side of Main Street. South side of Main Street. So
Split it at 4?
Yeah, so Elderwood's already higher density. There could definitely be some density at the intersection, and there could definitely be some density over here, with these buildings. After that, this is a pretty steep drop-off, so I'm saying 2.5 to finish it out. which is what I think that church is. I think that's about 2.5. Right. Okay. All right, so then we go to Swarmville 60. Oh, sorry, I skipped 47, Main Strip. Oh, the other side. So we talked about separating that block between Richfield and the village line, so that we could do 4 there and then 2.5 everywhere else. That's still okay with everybody?
Where are you gonna split it?
At Richfield, there's one orphan parcel basically now.
Okay.
So that should stay more consistent with the village, and then 47 can drop down. Okay. That's 2.5. So then we've got Swarmville. We're up all the way up at 60. You want to bring the guy all the way up there? You think that's probably pretty clearly 2.5? Right. There's some weird things going on up there, though. Okay. Is that building really, can you go to Swarmville Station, whatever that thing's called? Yeah, across from the fire hall? Is it that tall? Yeah, okay, 2.5, all right, perfect. And then Dodge and Campbell. Well, so herein lies the dilemma. Because I know that there's a project proposed. This is Crow's Nest, right? Okay, so the dilemma I have is that the current zoning and the outcome from the zoning board and then the outcome approved by the planning board would not fit a traditional node, which is what we're proposing. So, to put Alyssa on the spot for a while.
I advocated for traditional. There, we were outvoted. It made, the neighborhood requested a more walkable community. They thought that bringing the buildings to the street would create an even further buffer from their homes, would retain the mature canopy. There were lots of resident pluses to doing that. And just because it wasn't code and law, they were not required to do it, so they did not do it. They cherry-picked a few things that were adopted language from the comprehensive plan, but the code was still the code.
What do they need the variance for?
Setbacks. So, we had a couple ZBA members that posed the question to the petitioner at the meeting, so you can see the video. And a lot of the discussion was on the basis of the neighbors, that they wanted the building pushed back along 990 for privacy.
Okay, so
Go ahead, Ellen.
They wanted open space and other garages next to that.
The planning board didn't act yet, they tabled it.
Oh, they did.
And we heard from the DOT, who is not going to grant driveway access to Campbell Boulevard from the project. So, we proposed an alternative to the developer's attorney, if they could maybe squash the building closer to Campbell, bring it closer to the intersection of Dodge and Campbell. That would get it even farther from the neighbors.
Which is my thought, right? Why not bring it up near Libro? Okay. So I'm comfortable taking that site, Libro's, Port of Entry, the Creative Play Learning Center, which is already a little bit closer towards traditional, that area, and classifying this as traditional, even though we're doing that and miss some concerns? Leave it traditional? So, my question becomes, if we're pushing for traditional, can the planning board, could they legally table the thing until the zoning change?
I don't know about that. Yeah, I don't know if they can do that.
Okay.
We're having some conversations with some folks related to this petition to see what we can do to try and achieve something that's more consistent with the traditional form here. So maybe we'll know more in a couple of weeks. I would advocate to just keep it as traditional, which strengthens the argument.
So this was,
That we can.
this was traditional in the comprehensive plan amendment
Yep.
in December. So when the zoning board looked at that, did they consider the direction of the comprehensive plan?
Yes, very much so. And there were many conversations of, this is in direct conflict with the comprehensive plan. And can we even, where's the weight of that based upon the code language not having changed as well? So all of that was in play, but it was outvoted.
Okay.
And, but I would say that, learning this, street change could have a lot of weight in what they wanted to do, but they also they didn't think that there was a market for true mixed use on the bottom floor. One of the variances was for, first floor apartment space. And they were dividing the building in half and doing commercial towards, Campbell, and then the other half was, residential on the first floor, which I didn't vote for either because it doesn't promote walkable neighborhoods, which is traditional and what the comprehensive plan called for.
Although, even in this form-based zoning, they will be able to do provision for residential on the first floor.
Yeah.
Certain
Well, they already at this point had, did they have an elevator at this point, or no? Was it walking up? So they were, it was an ADA compliance issue as well. There was a little bit of that didn't make it completely unreasonable what they were asking for, but, there were neighbors that lived on the street that would have liked an L building on Dodge and Campbell and, walkable restaurants and that.
How tall is that building proposed? So we're okay, a traditional 2.5?
It's 2.5. There is a usable, half story, and they asked for a few feet above what was allowed.
Okay, so we're traditional 2.5 here, yes? Okay, all right, so that's the list here. The balance, everything else you see in red and that burgundy color, are suburban. And we're gonna be getting some draft suburban language from, Code Studio next meeting, to look at what that means and what the differences are, but most of it has to do with building setback. The only thing I could ever see, like, really changing here personally is number 3. If the state decided to actually put Niagara Falls Boulevard on a road diet like they're talking about, that would be, pretty interesting conversation to have.
Can I ask though, if we're creating a whole traditional corridor on 18 and 24, which, abut residents, wouldn't it make sense to, have the residents be able to walk 24 all the way down to 13, as opposed to it taking a big, pedestrian break in the middle?
Okay, so let's look at those 3, but we're gonna look at 3, 24, and 18, up close here. You go into 3 and drop a guy in the middle of the boulevard and hope he doesn't get hit by a car.
Brian, if 3 changes, wouldn't 1 and 2 change too?
Well,
If you're gonna road diet, wouldn't you go to a traditional no 4-story in those 2?
I wanna look at this for a minute, right? So there's a hotel, they're building that hotel in a suburban fashion, but keep going north. Classics there is actually built to a traditional, right, the main building, then that falls apart real fast. Keep going. So Tonawonda's kinda got this weird thing going on because their parcels are so narrow. So you look at these buildings and they're suburban right now, but they're also, there's not a lot of inherent building value there, right? And then when you get closer to the intersection, now turn around, look the other way. So Grapevine, which somehow gets the ability to build on the right of way, and then the 3 or 4 buildings after that, which are the more traditional kind of, that's a traditional building, right? Those are the old home with a business. Those are built to the street. I don't think it's that hard to picture this thing changing. And if we're serious about telling the state we want a road diet, and you got kind of junk 50s buildings on both sides, is this a place that we say, hey, we want to knowingly make a change?
Yes, traditional favors the pedestrian. We're trying to create a more walkable street and encourage safety, and I think that all makes sense. And you're creating walkable communities for the Willow Ridge community directly behind it. That's only, a parcel or two away, so I think that would enhance Amherst, yes.
Helen, you look like you want to say something here. What do you think? Dan? Yeah, but look at that, go back to that hotel that Tonawanda's building.
It's right there. It's right.
Yeah.
Wow,
I mean,
right there.
it's 3 stories with side yard parking. That's a shallow lot. If that thing were pulled up to the street.
I think a traditional farm there is fine. I'd just be wary of the height.
I would only say 2.5.
Yeah.
So, anybody disagree with making that a traditional corridor? All right, before we go to Sheridan.
So we're talking about 3, right?
Yep.
4 and... No, 4 and 5 are going to stay the way they are.
Yeah, 4 and 5 are a little crazy.
Yeah.
Can we go up to 2 and 1 though, Dave?
Where are those?
Dave's even more aggressive than I am. Well, two is an interesting dilemma too. Can you drop a guy on the boulevard? Where's 2? Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah, I don't know, Dave. You want to make the case here?
Well, it's special. I think 2 more so than 1. 1, you tend to get a lot of vehicular traffic that probably then shoots up Robinson and North French. But if you're looking at, I'm looking at this from a road dimension standpoint. So if the road diet's going to continue down the boulevard, conceivably to at least the canal and the border, why wouldn't we then advocate for traditional form of development on those basically shopping center parcels?
I think it'd be hard to convince the town to do the same thing and put all those buildings into Tonawanda into an existing non-compliant state. And if you just did it on our side, I don't know how it works. Or is that, at that point, it is both our side?
Yeah.
I shoot myself in the foot.
Well, it's unfortunate that we're not trying to encourage some sort of waterfront, development where restaurants, instead of car washes, are cropping up and creating another dining district. That just to me is the tragedy that there's a car wash going there that's going to pollute that water, as opposed to something that could have really enhanced our experience here.
So the car wash is north of East Robinson, right? It's up near where Menny was? Yeah, and, I mean, ironically, it overlooks Tonawonda's Botanical Gardens. But if we just drop south and look at 2 for a minute, if you were going to advocate for something, those lots do oftentimes touch the water. So, I could see that being...
Isn't there state funding that they can get state funding to better waterfront when they actually try to, better the water quality there?
You know what's gonna happen here? I'm gonna say this, and Dan's gonna sigh really, really loudly for a minute, because I think what this wants to be is handled by the LWRP committee, and I think it wants to be local waterfront mixed use. Yeah, that's it.
Absolutely.
I'm on that committee, I vote yes.
I think 2 and 1.
Yeah, I think that's a tremendous asset that we're not at all utilizing. It's a completely, a scenic corridor that no one is seeing.
It's the only place we have that opportunity in the town.
Yeah, I think that would explode, and it would improve, yes, all the good things.
You have a question?
It's on the whiteboard.
I'm not allowed to cite my whiteboard.
Yeah, also, here we have backing up all
I don't know what's wrong with that one.
It's
not on.
It works. I think you're on here.
Projecting very well then. I'm loud. So you go down Creekside, there's some random single-family houses, but then you get to the mess that is dated, office park, flex, industrial.
I'm okay saying that this should receive a local waterfront zoning, but
What does that mean?
It is.
I think you better explain what that means, because it is in the LWRP boundaries.
Between Sweet Home and
I'm saying it probably doesn't fit our traditional zoning where we pull buildings up to the street and they have a very traditional look and character and feel. I think this one wants to be something that's water related, so the buildings actually back to the water and create water overlooks and decks along the water and all that stuff.
There's a street there, you can do that.
Oh, that's true. Traditional could pull to Old Boulevard instead. Well, for now, I would say let's take 2 and turn it into traditional. In the LWRP, Ellen, we could always undo that if we want to create a 3rd zoning package.
So this needs to be addressed in the LWRP too, and it probably needs to match where is that?
Yeah, but that's an LWRP question later on.
But when it comes to land use, you know what I'm saying here?
Right, but I'm saying from now, the better play would be to take 2 and turn it into traditional, and then in the LWRP committee decide whether or not we can live with traditional or whether we need to add something that has more water-based function. Of course, with the road there, as Brian said, it's not like we're gonna go build a deck all the way to the water, we're gonna build to a street still.
That's true, but then those buildings have Adirondack chairs and decking, and it's a park space, it's pocket park space by their business that will only increase their value.
If the residential weren't there, I would say you close old Niagara Falls Boulevard and turn it into a pedestrian walk.
Right.
And then snug everything up to like almost like a boardwalk type feel.
Right, that'd be lovely.
How many houses are there? But I'm looking at the area south of East Robinson. That's like the easier place to do this, right? Right. No, there's at least one house on North French, and then there's a house. I guess that's commercial too. Yeah. I like the idea of making that traditional, then we have to decide what happens north of East Robinson. So I think the problem here is if we go north of East Robinson, go north, is the stuff on the right might not want to match the stuff on the left, right? So the west side of Niagara Falls Boulevard would be traditional, and then the stuff on the right side of Niagara Falls Boulevard could either be suburban, it almost just wants to be suburban. There's an architect thing to say, what does it want to be?
Right, you're still servicing, you don't want to create a food desert and, chase out the Wegmans. I think that the other side of the street completely lends itself to what you're proposing, and, it would only, they get their services and they get a fine experience across the street.
Yeah.
And that poisonous...
There is no place to pull a boat over, or a kayak, and get out and get something to do, or something. Definitely a missed opportunity.
And we have a bike trail coming down that side.
Right, you could do a pedestrian bridge even across.
Can you zoom in on the old, what was the old restaurant there? Yeah, I miss Jamaica Joe's. There's a bike path there, right?
Right.
Yeah, all right, so traditional to the east side and suburban to the, suburban east and traditional west.
Then the question remains 2.5 either side, or are you going higher on the
Got
third
your
side?
friendly neighborhood car wash there.
I get, car wash, that's already permitted, right?
Yeah. I mean,
And you got,
I think it's an admirable...
you got a car wash and a Wendy's and a McDonald's.
You got suburban development all up and down there.
But here's the problem, you wouldn't want the old Jamaica Joe's to be suburban. You'd want that to be a traditional...
Right. Well, that's why, I just wondering if you can parse this up a little bit, because...
The backside of the parcels certainly want to be...
I mean, what if you went north, what is that east-west road that's just south of Jamaica Joe's? What is that, a driveway or something? Yeah, I mean, you take advantage of that. I just, again, I'm having a hard time seeing this transition, and I don't know if there's enough room there to do something on the backside along the creek. It's unfortunate, but...
Even if you have something the size of Morpat that doesn't even have parking, but pedestrians are walking there, that place always has people in it.
So that's why I'm saying north of that, between the cemetery and the Delta Sonic, if you will, or the Wendy's, that area in there, where the bike path kind of traverses through there, that's not a bad place for that. And that's a Morpat size area.
Can you zoom into the area just north of East Robinson Road? Yeah, right there. So what is that? What's that thing north of that? Right.
It's a fence.
So you got a Pizza Hut, you got a small animal hospital, you got some residential parcels in back of it. Like, if somebody bought that section, what would you want that to become? I probably want it to face the road, right? If somebody did a parcel of somebody there...
Somebody's gonna buy it, they're gonna want to take advantage of Niagara Falls Boulevard. Right?
But I'm saying, wouldn't you want them to consider Old Niagara Falls Boulevard as well?
Sure.
That could be a block of mixed use there.
Okay.
I did the zoning for that area. It wasn't zoned to support Old Man River.
Old Man River doesn't have any zoning.
They were zoned residential.
Yeah.
Yeah, fine, you put an Old Man River here. Alright, I'm still thinking traditional west of the boulevard. At least I made snide remarks. No, it wasn't into the microphone and recorded. You wanna go, I mean, do you wanna just take the area just north of East Robinson Road up to the Key Bank and say up to that point, it's traditional? So what, so Delta Sonic's existing non-compliant, they're never gonna change? Oh, yeah. So we'll just apply for variances anyways. Because I'm under the speaker.
So where are you proposing segmenting?
We're not, right now.
He was proposing maybe pulling out up to the Key Bank from Robinson up to the Key Bank.
Here down, from about here down.
What's the benefit of breaking that out as opposed to just trying to make that entire swath an opportunity area to redevelop?
I was trying to avoid getting eye rolls.
I think that part of the incentive would be that we're all in, right? If you break it up, then they know that they don't have businesses that would draw foot traffic to their own business, so you're limiting the amount, you're limiting the development across from the Botanical Gardens, right where it would need to center and spread from there, so, I don't know.
I'm sold on taking it all as traditional center, and then letting the car wash be existing non-compliant.
Right, and let someone buy them out, you know.
Yeah, things will be happening.
I can wish, I can dream.
Okay. All right.
Over, you need to get gas.
So we're moving on. We're moving on. We need to come back down. There was a request to look at 18 and 24. They're Sheridan Drive. They're the two suburban sections of Sheridan Drive. 18 is half in the Opportunity Zone. The north half is in the Opportunity Zone, and 24 is outside the Opportunity Zone.
Traditional lends itself to giving more of a buffer to the residents. These are very densely populated areas, including parkland, and I also know that there's a lot of people who live in these neighborhoods do actively walk to the businesses around. I walk to the infusion clinic up the street. My husband bikes down these roads all the time.
Sheridan. First, let's make sure Duff's would fit traditional.
I'm actually gonna suggest
Can we
that,
landmark that?
Brian, I'm gonna suggest that we kind of stop at this point, unless you just wanna have conversations. We don't even know what the suburban zoning looks like.
Okay, I just wanna look at this for one minute.
We're getting tired and it's gonna take...
I understand.
Places where we're not sure what the code is gonna call for.
So this is an area that we're gonna need to look at, then, once we get the traditional forms back. But I think the point is kind of, it's a suburban area that's bounded by traditional on both ends.
You get to walk to the businesses, and then all of a sudden you can't walk. And so you would just be discouraging foot traffic to the North Town Center and other places that are going to be built up specifically to draw in foot traffic. You won't be able to get there safely in Sheridan.
So I'm okay kind of heading off here with that comment, but I do think that this is an area that we need to talk about, because that street section's not good, right, on either side.
There's the traditional development right there. That's the one parcel we've been able to successfully get them to pull up to the street, so.
And you wouldn't want to see the opposite side mirror that?
No, I'm not saying I wouldn't. I mean, that's the one example that, I think Ellen probably worked on this, for the most part, to try to get them pull it up. You got the parking on the side.
So maybe what we could do,
The only thing I'm gonna suggest to you, we talk a lot about walkability here. I want to just point out where the sidewalk is on Sheridan Drive.
well, and that's part of the problem. That's a big part of the problem.
It's not
neither here nor there. So I guess the thing that I would request is as Code Studios finishing up suburban in this area, I would rather point to Lazy Boy and say that's more of a preferred condition? Because you could, if they can create the suburban in that district to match that feel, then I think we'd be in good shape.
That was definitely an improvement to the street.
Okay. Yeah, it is a good.
Well, it was well done, but yes, I would comment that there was no measurable gradient change that made that piece of sidewalk any safer than the sidewalk on the other side, which I think should have been addressed and should be addressed going forward.
All right, we don't have a quorum, so I don't need a motion to adjourn. Does anybody have any other business they want to bring forward? I will offer a few minutes for a public,
There is. Sorry? Do you have the calendar for the month? No, it's just, sorry. No, I'm not done with the calendar for a second. Just so folks are tracking.
It's on the agenda.
Tracking along the way. I don't know if it's on the agenda or not. I guess it's future meetings. Yep. So right now, we're scheduled to meet next Wednesday, or next Thursday, my fault, next Thursday. That was changed to this calendar. Okay.
In this room?
This room, yeah. We had to move it over to Thursday because we couldn't get the room on Wednesday. We have a meeting scheduled for the 13th. Just hang on to that one. I suspect what we're going to find in our mailbox tomorrow morning is a link to the suburban districts. So hopefully we'll have a couple of weeks to work through those. Assuming we've got something that we can actually push out and share, we'll try and do that as soon as possible prior to the 6th. Right now, we're looking at the 18th as a time frame for a joint meeting of the town board, planning board, and ZBA for the folks that can make it there. There'll be a briefing on the work that's been done up to this point at the town board work session. And then following that, there's two activities at the end of the month on the 25th and 26th. The 25th would be training and orientation for staff and other local developers and professionals, design professionals that would have to use the code. And then on the 26th, there would be a meeting for other planners and staff, building department staff, code enforcement folks from other communities to come and we'll share the experience, share the code with them at that point. So this is to try and get the work done that we need to complete by the end of the month to fulfill the contract. Ken will keep you appraised of the times and dates over the next couple of weeks, but just so folks can kind of put that in your schedule and reserve as much time as you can. We appreciate that.
All right. Anybody else have anything they want to add? We're not in a meeting, but I'll invite the public to speak for a couple of minutes if you'd like. And just for sake of our recording, please state your name and address.
Don Smith, North Lawn. I noticed that the draft process is being heavily driven by contract dating situations. I just want to make sure that in the process nothing gets lost and you don't go too fast. That's my only request, such that you come up with something you really is only 80% or 90% complete or whatever it is. The other thing is the other thing occurs to me that after the final draft is complete and that draft is now becomes the working document, it has to be modified to become the final document, that you track all changes to the draft document through some mechanism, hopefully a software mechanism, that tracks the date and time of all changes so that we know what happened between the draft and the final, such that you have the date and the reason for the change documented so that you can have an audit history on the draft document to see how it got to the final one. That's the only thing I would suggest that would be appropriate here. When it comes time for the public to get involved in the process, and apparently it isn't yet, so the question is, I'd like to see whether there's some sort of plan put in place for public so that they understand what their role in the process is, too, so they can be aware ahead of time what that is and what that public document is, not concurrent with the final voting on any of these things. So that was the only thing I requested. Thank you for listening to me.
No problem. And just for a clarification, for the committee's sake, we are kind of flying to the end of a contract, with NYSERDA and with a contractor. That doesn't mean that we're done with these zoning changes. So, I think we've accepted that, there's gonna be a period of time between the end of the official contract and the deliverables of the final drafts and the actual deliverance of that final draft from, planning board sort of approval to town board public hearing and town board acceptance or the adoption. We're not burning, a lot of oil to get to that point by April. Our goal is to get the bulk of the deliverables done, and that's one of the reasons why we're kind of in this hurried sort of format. But I think there comes a time in any project where you just have to kind of, that I always tell people it's like put up or shut up time, right? You just try to make a lot of gains, and this is the period we're in. But there's inevitably work to do on the back end of this as well. All right, Dan, do you want to add anything to the mix? All right, that said, we'll see everybody next Thursday. We're looking forward to drawing this thing into a good package. All right, thank you, everyone.